Hey guys, why is there a distinction between men and women, or masculinity and femininity, and who decides what that is? I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and I was telling her that I was reading a book, The Women Who Run with Wolves. I talked about this before, and I told her that the book is basically explaining about the female or the feminine archetypes and giving some exemplary stories of how you can read those stories to explore the feminine archetypes. Or she asked me, why is there such a distinction, and who decides what is a feminine trait and what is a feminine archetype or a female archetype? And I found it a very interesting question because I myself never really questioned that, which is maybe a bit naive. So I thought it was a very good question to dive into. I thought about it, and I think there's a pretty simple explanation, also something that I hope shows that it's not about separating us, but it's just the way that our brain is structured, and that giving certain things a name and connecting it to the things that they are most naturally connected to just makes a lot of sense. So I think the best point to start from is if we go back in time. So we are now currently living in a super modern day and age, which is beautiful. I love it. Like, there are a lot of comforts and things that we have right now. But imagine like the early humans, or in general, so you can see it with a lot of different mammals. But let's say very early humans, thousands and thousands of years ago, they lived in tribes, the hunter-gatherer people, and their life was very, very different. But regardless of how they lived, you can say that the difference between male and female is very small. I mean, we are the same species, so we all have 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, etc. So we are more the same than we are different, and that holds true from the past until now. But there are certain biological differences that are there and that have developed due to evolution in a certain way. So the way that we reproduce, for instance, is that if a man and a woman have intercourse, then the woman gets pregnant, and the consequence is that the woman has to carry the baby for 9 months, which is a long period of time where she is physically in a disadvantage, especially if you take into consideration the ancient mammal times, so the hunter-gatherer situation. It was very hard for her to travel around, and they didn't have comfortable chairs and couches and stuff like that. They had to sit and sleep on the floor in the forest. So that is a very difficult time, these 9 months. Then you had giving birth. I mean, just imagine, I know nowadays giving birth is also not easy, but well, we have hospitals and hygiene, and like back in the day, you did not. So the mortality rate during giving birth was also way higher. So it's actually a lethal risk to give birth. So that is a highly risky enterprise to have kids for a woman. And then, because we didn't have all these formulas and different kinds of supplementation for babies, breastfeeding was also like one of the essential things as a woman to make sure that your offspring survives, is to give that to them for, I don't know how long, for months until maybe a couple of years. So there is a huge, huge burden on the female to provide the possibility for the offspring to grow first and then to develop as a human being. That means that back in the day, women were mostly reliant on the rest of the tribe and the specific partner that they choose to have the child with. Because you can say in good times, the whole tribe would kind of care for the baby as well and made sure that they all grew up strong and healthy. But in times of scarcity, it's also every couple for themselves. Everyone wants to propagate their own genes into the future. That's the natural drive, which means that as a woman, you also have to navigate through the social landscape. You have to be good at cooperation, communication, and you have to find a man that can support you and will support you. So if we fast forward to current day and age, that is of course not the situation anymore. We live in a pretty advanced society where women, at least where I live, women can do whatever they want. They can work, they can go to school. There is virtually no difference between men and women. Of course, they still have to give birth. They have to carry the baby for 9 months, have to give birth. But certain things like breastfeeding is not essential anymore because we have formula. And I guess saying it from a male point of view, which I know is not like I don't have the insights, but I imagine it's more comfortable nowadays to carry a baby and have the baby with the facilities that we have. So it is actually possible for a woman to be um, carrying the baby without a man around, and she can maintain her lifestyle and sustain herself throughout that period. So that is a thinkable situation, although back in the day that was absolutely not the case. Well, why I'm explaining this is because if you want to understand the archetypes that are basically structures that are way in the back of our brain, ingrained through hundreds of thousands of years of mammal behavior, these are just patterns that exist inside of us. All right, if we go back to the ancient times, we realize now that was a huge time investment for women to reproduce, but we also all have, or on average, the natural tendency to want to reproduce. So you still do it, but it has certain consequences on what kind of behavioral traits would give you the highest chance of doing that successfully. So for women, one of the big points is that they are very, very specific and very picky with the partner that they choose because it has such a huge impact. They want to have a partner who is able to sustain them through this difficult months, even years, and someone who actually will do that. So you need to have someone who is able to hunt, physically strong, but also someone who is kind, someone who is courageous to go out, but also someone who's not too stupid and takes stupid risks, let's say. What that means for men is that they actually have to compete with each other in order to show these traits, and in that way kind of create a hierarchy of who is the most desirable male and who is the second most, etc. That's something that naturally occurs if you have this natural judge, which all the women are the judges, and they collectively decide who is the most desirable male. Typically, in those societies, those males get to pick which women they want to reproduce with, and then it like you peel off from the top, basically. So just to summarize that, that already gives us the key masculine and feminine traits. So that would be competitiveness, physical strength, the willingness to use physical strength, entrepreneurship, so trying to find new ways to create more value. For women, it's good judgment, so they need to be able to decide what is or isn't a good partner. That is usually transferred into something like intuition, so a kind of feeling that you get. Maybe you cannot fully rationalize it, but an extra sense that helps you make better judgments. Compassion, cooperation, communication, all the things that help you thrive in a tribe, to make sure that you are safe and that your needs are understood. And a high sensitivity for risk. So that's a bit of the contrast from entrepreneurship on one side, seeing opportunities, looking for opportunities, and the feminine is the high risk aversion, because in these situations, it's because they are caring for their kid and they're caring for themselves. The lowest amount of risk is the best for a female. So I hope this explains a little bit the idea from where this separation comes. So it is not the case that the masculine and the feminine is something that only male or female have. In fact, you have just as many male as female ancestors. You have both of these inside of your primitive brain. And as Carl Jung said, to become one complete individual, you need to integrate both the masculine and the feminine. So just take these categories as such, as that we just name them as masculine and feminine, does not necessarily mean that you need to live in a certain way, but it gives you a structure to think about it and to understand it a little bit better. And as so far as you might feel more comfortable with masculine traits or feminine traits, that's completely up to you. It just gives you a way to think about it, and also to realize that as you want to become one fully integrated individual, you want to have a balance between the two. Therefore, it's useful to look what is the masculine, see how many of those traits are represented in your own personality, in your own life, and maybe you will feel better if you consciously try to integrate more of the feminine ones, so that you are more in balance in that way. Not to say that women should only look into the feminine and men only into the masculine, which is exactly what I discussed in one of my previous videos. It was about masculinity and femininity, and also why I started to read this book, The Women Who Run with Wolves, in the first place, because I wanted to explore more about the feminine archetypes, what I can learn about that and how I can integrate that more into my day-to-day existence. So a bit of a rant, a bit of a throwback into the ancient times. I hope it was helpful. I think it was nice for myself also to investigate this and clarify the reasons of why we have masculinity and femininity. Let me know in the comments if you want to have more videos like this. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And above all, don't forget to have a great day.